that definitely is what Everything Everywhere All at Once is in spades, is all these many things that seem to be completely unrelated and actually function in opposition, and yet taken together are able to tell a story that is heart on its sleeve, emotional and good. They heard that potential in our music.
I'm Carolyn Hadlock, Executive Creative Director at Young & Larimore, and this is the Beautiful Thinkers Project, a podcast where I ask founders, creators, leaders, and visionaries how they bring their ideas to life. As we enter these conversations with thinkers across disciplines like art, science, and business, we'll learn a little bit more about the practices and identifiers that create beautiful thinking, something defined so individually, but so universally recognizable. Welcome to the Beautiful Thinkers Project. Today I'm talking with Ryan Lott, founding member of Son Lux, a collective of 3 artists since 2014. You'll know their work from Tomorrow's Trilogy, as well as the 49-track film score for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thanks so much. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm so happy to have you. I would love to start the conversation with, oh my God, you've been busy. You released the Tomorrow Trilogy in 2021, and then you just finished touring, and you scored easily one of the most original films of the year. And then there's a pandemic.
Yeah.
So Son Lux is a self-described sonic test kitchen, which I love. And I'd really like to just hear you tell us the origin story of when you founded it and then the evolution since you've had Ian and Rafik join you.
Yeah. So the project began when I started to feel an urge to develop sounds that I wanted to hear, but that I wasn't hearing. I basically wanted to make music that I wanted to listen to, which is actually kind of ironic because once you make your music, you never listen to it. But I was driven by a desire to reconcile different parts of my creative being that seem to be inherently at odds with one another. And I thought for sure there was a way to do that. I just hadn't heard it yet. In particular, reconciling my European classical training and the sort of the way that my brain was trained over time in the course of my studies as a pianist and a composer, and my love for pop music and hip hop and jazz and basically everything else. So I wanted to bring opposing forces to bear and find a reconciliation for them in a single musical project.
I mean, you are pretty prolific. You published quite a lot. And then
there's a lot of Son Lux music out there.
There is. I love it. Is it true that you first started composing for dance? Is that how you sort of started?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So that's not when I first started composing. I first started composing just as like a little kid at the piano,
Yeah.
My first time out of the gate professionally composing music was for dance. And my wife, Jennifer, is a dancer and choreographer, and she got me into writing music for dance because she got me into writing music for her. And then through her, I developed a network of relationships with other choreographers and companies and stuff. And writing music for dance has been the thing that I've actually done the most consistently throughout my career. The last 24 years.
Wow.
Basically been writing music for dance, which is crazy because I met Jen when I was 19. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, you guys are still going strong.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I feel like when I heard that, some of your work fell into place for me because I do feel like it has a very almost live feel, like a theatrical. And so I'm just curious, do you think that shaped how you approach music since you've done a lot of that through the years?
That's a cool observation or response. I think what it is for me is that music always has to move me physically. I'm not a dancer, but there is some connection that is very strong in me between motion and music. And I feel like I don't really become inebriated by the idea unless it begins to move my body and make me want to move. Behind me, you might see that I work from a standing desk, and part of it, and then I have my synth at an angle.
Oh, I see. You
So that I
stand.
can
Yeah.
stand and play. I basically always want to be able to stay in motion, even if it's not a sound that's an inherently rhythmic sound that you normally associate with motion. Haunting sounds that like make me lunge or make me, have some sort of physical response. Maybe that's why a lot of people have historically liked to use Son Lux music for choreography, which is really, really cool. There's something in the music, and I think maybe it's that for me, my own litmus test is movement and motion. Who knows?
I mean, that was the first thing that came to my mind was kinetic. It just felt very kinetic. So, okay. Was it in 2015, Ian and Rafiq joined? Do I have that right?
I actually enlisted them at the end of 2013 so that we could tour together in 2014. Originally, I engaged Ian and Rafiq in a live musician capacity. So
performing.
So it was like Son Lux was still Orion, and then Son Lux Live, I had bandmates. That was the original idea. I didn't know to be more ambitious than that and more hopeful. But what happened was I quickly fell in love with these guys. We had a camaraderie and a type of unlikely chemistry, musically speaking.
Yeah.
I immediately was learning so much from them and different things from each of them. Like I gained 2 teachers when I gained 2 bandmates.
Had they worked together before?
Once. One of them was like subbing for someone else on the gig. So it was like a random chance meeting, but they hit it off. I had already known Rafiq and had worked with him on my first film score, a film called Disappearance of Eleanor Rigby. I worked with him on a collaborative album I did with Serengeti and Sufjan Stevens. So I knew I really wanted to keep working with him. I actually leaned into Rafiq to help me find a third or potentially a fourth member. Ian popped into his mind because Ian liked a picture of a pizza restaurant that Rafiq posted on Facebook. And
high bar.
Yeah. Well, what happened is it jogged his memory of this dude who that he had worked with. Like Rafiq was in the zone of like trying to help create this band with me, and so he was jogging his brain. I didn't want another white male in the band. It's so easy to like, if you want to create a group of musicians, like so easy to just hire a bunch of white dudes. There's just a lot more of us. It was just a very important.
Intentional. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just really important to me. So there was a lot of folks in Rafiq's sort of Rolodex that could work. So Ian actually didn't immediately come to mind because they'd only done one show together, remember? So him clicking like on on that picture of a pizza place
that's fate for you.
Yeah, it turned out to be an incredibly important click. He
had no idea. And I think all 3 of you guys are so different. You bring such different things to it. And it almost seems like you're on a mission for something. But I'm curious to hear the 3 of you came together, you enjoy your own careers individually, respectively, you come together. Well, how has that changed Son Lux?
So I decided that I really wanted to change the identity of the band on a fundamental level, not just have live bandmates,
Yeah.
There are pretty selfish reasons. Once I met Rafiq and Ian, I realized I am like these guys in a lot of ways, musically, but there's sort of like a better version of those things than I am like in my imagination. I have a lot to learn from them.
Yeah.
They're going to make Son Lux music better. They're going to make me look better, And it was kind of like any like committed relationship. You get in it for selfish reasons. Yeah. Ultimately, it's because it makes you feel good. It makes you feel like a better person. You feel like you have a better future ahead of you. Same with this. Same with Son Lux. I was like, there's so much potential and so many ways that I could like explore more deeply musical directions with these guys than I could solo. Everyone is deferential to the whole. It's a very democratic kind of operation.
To the process.
Yeah, we never move forward with anything. If someone doesn't want to move forward with something, we don't. But I think we always find some beautiful way to make consensus on an idea. And we also have a lot of trust in one another. So there are times when not all of us can engage on an idea. If there's a quick turnaround or there's like a final step of something, it doesn't require all of us to be totally engaged.
That's nice.
Right, exactly. So that's part of the reason why we can be very prolific, because there's a lot of trust. So Ian can say, I have to be out of town for family reasons on this so-and-so, but I trust y'all, and then we can move forward.
That does let you cover a lot of ground quickly.
Yeah, divide and conquer, many hands make light work.
And you guys talked about this, I don't know, I think it was after they joined, but I was going to ask you to expand on the idea of talking about the actual sound versus the perception of sound and what you mean by that.
One of the things that I love, that we all love really, is that fine line between the familiar and the unfamiliar in sound. Mm-hmm. This is kind of like the easiest example of it, or the most simple example. When you hear a sound that's quite familiar, but it's in a sonic context that's strange, it casts a new light on something that you think you know, and that's a great feeling, usually. And it's like introducing excitement into the familiar. And the opposite is also true, it works both ways. Another example is when, and this is what we lean into probably the most, we design instruments from sounds we record. And even from like short performances, we can create instruments from those performances that are playable and programmable and flexible. When the raw material for those instruments is familiar, no matter how far you push the development of that instrument into strange places, at its core, it's imbued with the familiar. And there's something like home about it. There's something home, And I really like skirting the line between those things. Like, what is that sound? Like, it's not so strange and it's not so
alien.
Yeah, it's not so alien that it's like disorienting, unless I want it to be.
Yeah.
Of course, it's completely acceptable. But where I feel like I live most as a music maker is developing tools that themselves live in two different places at once. A familiar town and an exotic far-off land, conceptually speaking. And yeah, I just love that, because it's, no matter which way you frame it, you're surprised, and surprise is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. So whether you're embedding the familiar and the unfamiliar and the familiar, it works both ways, and it kind of gives permission. That's interesting. So
yeah.
What do you think it is about you and just your becoming as a person that pushes you to that edge? Is there something in your life experience, or just the way you view the world, or is it mostly just live in the sound space?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I've always had an aversion to the established and settled. I've always felt like the one who wants to move on from what's been done and find the next thing. When I was growing up studying piano, I hated it so much. Piano lessons.
Mom made you do it.
Yeah, it was a family rule. I hated it so much. Oh my God. And honestly, even all the way through college, because I studied piano all the way through college, and I hated even my last piano lesson. But at some point when I was around, I guess it would have been like 8 or something, I started to sort of feel like I wanted to change what was on the page. I started to hear different ways that the piece of music could have gone, and I started to play around with my own little ideas, usually that were based on me sort of like happening upon something familiar with my fingers that was like something I'd heard on the radio or some, and then like not really being able to figure it out how to play it, and then instead using it as a starting point for writing something else. And I realized at some point I loved that. I love this whole idea that I could make my own music and make my own sound. And I mean, that's all I'm doing right now. It's like, my whole life, and on a micro and macro level, it's basically all that I'm interested in. But it was like that's where music came alive for me. It wasn't learning how to play, music, of old dead white guys. I really just it just didn't light me up, which is interesting because it totally lights me up when I hear exquisite performances or just like sensitive, interesting performances of European classical music. Like I love the music, but I don't love
to make
perform
it.
it. It's not fun for me to emulate it. I don't get anything out of it. Doesn't do anything for my brain or my heart. And music just came alive for me when I realized I could just make my own. It was there for me to discover rather than something settled that I had to learn how to get on that path exactly right and follow the
Yeah,
exact.
it's kind of like the difference between expression and learning. You could learn whatever you're supposed to learn for recital, but you wanted to use it to express something new.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's exactly right. That's a good way to put it. I like that. I never thought about it like that before.
But at the same time, one of the things I really like about you, Ryan Lott, is like you're also not just this sort of purist either, because you work, dare I say, in the commercial space like us. You've done that in the past,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you don't seem to have a huge aversion to it. How do you reconcile that sort of commercialism versus artistic expression?
Yeah, it's much more of a gradient than that for me. This morning I was just helping my son like create a sunset kind of scape behind these flowers that he was coloring in. And I'm like blending these colors together and showing him how you could, create a gradient. And kind of like the sunset, like the deep orange and the deep purple and blues, like they work so well together. I started by coloring everything yellow or everything orange, so that even when I went back and I started doing the deep blues and purples, the orange was underneath there, so that there was some sort of like presence of the orange, even though I'm kind of coloring over it with the blues. And it's like that sort of like everything everywhere all at once. That sort of all at once of things that are opposites is what makes everything so rad.
That's a good lesson for your child. Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. They're complementary colors, but they're two completely different colors.
Yeah.
But they come together and create something new. Yeah. No, I definitely get that. Did you bring a different intent when you worked in the more commercial space versus the artistic, or do you tend to just go to the same kind of aesthetic space?
So I spent years as an ad composer when I was developing the Son Lux project in the early days. That was an incredibly valuable period of time for me. This would have been 2007 to 2011. I still do, bespoke commercial work and quite enjoy it. But when I was doing it full time, it was basically an imposed series. Like it was basically like every single day was a set of etudes, compositional etudes.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, here, I'm going to learn how to emulate AC/DC. And then I'm going to learn how to emulate, Phoenix. And then I'm going to learn how to emulate Sufjan Stevens. And I'm going to learn how to emulate. It's like very emulative. So there was definitely an inherent rub there, because in ad music, you're never, almost never asked to abandon all reference points, all touch points, all genre, all idiomatic foundations. Composing new music for advertising and for commercial purposes, you have a chance to kind of do both. You have to have your idiomatic language in one hand, but then you also have your creative impulses on the other hand, and you have to reconcile them. And it's kind of like a puzzle. It's kind of a challenge. How do you be yourself? How do you create something new while clearly the job is to follow? And how do you lead and follow at the same time? So I saw it as an opportunity. I mean, dude, I grew so much. I learned how to play different instruments. I learned how to create in all sorts of different genres. And each time I saw it as an opportunity to take something that maybe it won't ever sound this way, but to take some morsel of that experience and channel it into something that I want to do for myself. And there were so many times when I would happen upon something that was far too interesting for the ad. And I would just kind of like set it aside and let it be fodder for Son Lux material. And ultimately, what wound up happening is one day I got a call from a friend who's a composer at another music house, and he said, Yeah, dude. So I just got, a creative call, and the brief was you.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, why didn't they just call you? And I had a pretty big wake up moment at that. I was starting to develop the Son Lux project, and it was starting to become its own,
Take
you know,
shape.
take shape and
Yeah.
have its own life. And here I was, because I needed to pay the bills. Here I was, kind of buried, kind of hiding in this music house, this unnamed, music house composer,
Yeah.
working really hard
Yeah.
and doing really hard work, because it's extremely hard and competitive work. I mean, I'm glad that I was having those experiences, because it showed me that I needed to go out on my
To break
own. And
away. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's funny because so I come from the art world, and
Mhm.
then we had all these conversations when we were in school and we were drawing and painting, and we were just I mean, it was pounded into us. You have to learn the traditional methods of drawing, and you have to understand all the techniques and all the mediums, and then you break out.
Mhm.
So it sounds like that was kind of a formative experience for you in that way, and then you could take what you want and tuck it away, and then break out and do a whole new expression.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it, to frame it as well. I think that's exactly right. I kind of developed an admiration for music that I had dismissed in my sort of classical kid snobbery.
Yeah.
I found out early on in that job that there was a lot of stuff I could not do and I did not know how to do,
Mm,
that I was having a really hard time doing, that was aspects of music that I, looked down my nose on.
yeah.
So I had a come to Jesus moment where I was, you know, pretty early on, where I just decided, to the extent that a piece of music does something that I don't know how to do, or does it better than I can do it, that music has something on me, right?
Mhm.
And so I can't be snobby about this. I can't think about this in such a binary way. For example, for Everything Everywhere All at Once, I had the opportunity to work with Randy Newman. I got to write a song for Randy Newman in the style of Randy Newman.
Oh, that's amazing. That's
and sing,
hilarious.
and
That's
sing it
very meta.
and sing it with him. And it was incredible. But when Daniels, the director's, first proposed the idea of this song to me, before Randy Newman was a possibility, I had this instinct in me to, okay, this is the kind of job that comes along all the time when you're an ad composer. You have to be chameleonic and super convincingly chameleonic,
Yeah.
So I immediately called my former boss. He was so good at making, in particular, humorous songs that were like super well crafted. They felt like they were the kind of songs they feel like they had always existed. The reason why I did that is because I was like, this isn't who I am. But then the movie, the process developed, and then it called upon, and this was true of all of us, it called upon so many different parts of us, individually and collectively, that we didn't know existed. And kind of like
Yeah.
what happens in the film, which is like, we started to discover different versions of ourselves. And at some point along the way, I realized, oh, Daniel's had more faith in us than we had in ourselves. And so things that we had thought we were going to be farming out to other people, because that's not us, Daniel's had created a multiverse for us to be many different versions of ourselves. And
Wow.
yeah, and what happened was, I was like, you know what, actually, in another universe, I am the one who composes this song and kills it, in the same way that, Michelle Yeoh's character, like in another universe, like, she is the sign spinner who has all these weird weird skills, from flipping a sign on the street corner, or the hibachi chef, or whatever it is. And I sat down, and within a half an hour I'd written it. It came effortlessly. And I realized that I had these skills that I developed over time, and I was so thankful for them, because in a very unlikely and creative way, I had this beautiful experience of like I didn't wake up that year ever thinking this was going to be possible, that I was going to be writing a song for Randy Newman in style of Randy Newman and duetting with him. And that's only one example of this movie,
Yeah, you had what, 49 tracks on that?
Right. And then, that's only one example of the collaborators that we were able to work with. David Byrne and Mitski were another dream collaboration.
I can't even imagine.
Another song that once we had them enlisted, I was kind of terrified. I was like, how am I going to write a song for these two that is worthy of not only each individually, but collectively? But you know what? Same thing. I sat down. I knew Mitski was going to sing my part, and I just imagined I was Mitski, and I'd spent so much time with the movie that I felt like I had some sort of like soulish, like you were saying earlier, expression versus learning. I feel like rather than trying to learn the song that it's supposed to be, I just was able to just like take a deep breath and express. And I think I wrote that song in, I think also about a half an hour,
Wow. I mean, that's incredible that you were able to generate and to have somebody hire you and then stretch you out beyond, maybe those were his expectations all the time. I mean, it's kind of like, I feel like we're all like the lion and the Tin Man and the Wizard of Oz. Like we always had it all along. We just needed somebody else to show us we had it.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what great directors do, is that they spot potential
and let it go, let it fly.
Yeah. And they were so good at that.
Well, so did that particular film, how much, I can't even imagine reading that screenplay. I mean, it would just
yes.
it would be so confusing.
Oh my God. It was completely confusing.
You'd almost need him to perform it for you. I mean, how did you?
Here's what happened. So they hit us up in September of 2019, right? So pre-pandemic, a long time ago. And they didn't even have a cast yet. Mm. So they had a rough script that, if it was made, would have probably made a 3.5 hour movie. There was so much in it that in the end was not in the movie. But we had this original meeting in advance of them sending the script, and it was just to kind of like feel out the relationship, vibe it out, like, because they've been listening to our music a lot, and I think they heard the potential for us. We're a multiverse band,
Yeah.
Even before doing this, like, again, reconciling all these seeming opposites and finding a cohesion in them is like something that Daniels had never heard us say that out loud, but they could hear it in the music. And I think that as filmmakers, they wanted to be able to do that. That definitely is what Everything Everywhere All at Once is in spades, is all these many things that seem to be completely unrelated and actually function in opposition, and yet taken together are able to tell a story that is heart on its sleeve, emotional, and good. So they came to us because they heard that potential in our music. So they reached out to us. We had a great call, and then they said, "Okay, cool. We'll send you the script, and you can see what you think." And then they sent us the script, and it was like, "What? Like, what even is this?"
Yeah.
Like, I remember so vividly just thinking, my file has to be messed up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I could see that.
I would, some page turns were like, wait, what? Like, it just like where are we? Like, it just felt like, I honestly couldn't keep up with it. It was so absurd. I mean, obviously it was so enchanting in a lot of ways and so like surprising, but it was like, my takeaway was, oh man, this would have been so cool to, make a movie, to score a movie by these guys. It's too bad this one will never be made.
You just didn't think it was going to happen?
No way. There's no way someone's going to make this movie.
They can't understand it. Yeah. Crazy.
Like, who are they going to find
to
like have an extended martial arts sequence with butt plugs? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's like, like, who's going to wear hot dog prosthetics on their hands? That's like a good actor. You know, it's like, that's such that somebody would spend the money to like make this movie so that people would actually see it, So I just didn't have enough faith. I had too many limitations.
And then it got made.
And what happened was, I think it was right around Michelle Yeoh signed on. And I think that was everything. Because, who was going to do this movie? Who was going to be Evelyn, if not Michelle Yeoh. I just
Yeah,
like,
she was
you know,
great.
crazy, crazy great. Because you had to be so many things. You had to be everything everywhere all at
All at
once.
once.
You know,
Yeah.
and again, it wasn't just like some white lady. It is so specific what this had to be. You know.
Yeah, you saw her and she just fit.
Well, it was like okay, so she had this sort of like name appeal that like also made it so bafflingly interesting, right?
Hmm.
Because it wasn't some incredible like stage actor zany woman who like you've never seen before, and so you don't have any expectations for that person. You
Right.
have with Michelle Yeoh, it's like she's royalty, like she's untouchable. So when she signed on, I remember Daniels were like, so guys, like we got Michelle Yeoh, and I remember like being like, wait, what? So this movie's actually going to get made? Like because if they got Michelle Yeoh, that means like, yeah, this movie's going to get made. And then it was like we got Jamie Lee Curtis, and then it was like,
Oh, that's my favorite. I mean, my favorite role of hers ever. She was phenomenal.
it's so amazing, like so unlikely. And since the film, I've been been like following her on her social media stuff, and
Yeah,
she's just
she's cool.
such an incredible person.
She's
Her
cool.
energy, and I had heard about her already in how she is professionally, which is super super generous and incredibly like go team all the way, all the time.
Yeah.
And she has a thing where she learns all of the crew members' names early on.
That's
I thought like
amazing.
it was so cool. And then when we went on set for EAO, we were
Yeah, I was
able to
gonna
go
say
on.
you got to meet everybody, I assume.
Not everybody. I
Yeah.
haven't met Jamie
Oh
actually.
no.
Rafiq is hopefully gonna meet her. There's a screening coming up in New York that she's gonna be at. We were together at the opening. She didn't come to the after party, so I didn't get to hang with her, but hung out with Key on a number of occasions. Super awesome. Same with Michelle. Michelle is like has taken us as a band kind of under her wing. It's so cool.
Oh,
She came to our LA show, and it's
she
just like
did.
so
That's
cool.
adorable.
Yeah, she texts with Ian and stuff. It's amazing.
Well, and who knows? Maybe we might see you at the Oscars, at least in the audience.
Who knows? Who knows? I would not put it past the potential this movie has to do something like that, but it would all be gravy, of course, because this was just such an amazing experience.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it. And you did a lot of the sound here in Indianapolis, yeah?
Almost all of my work on the film was there in Indianapolis. Yeah. So we left LA at the top of the pandemic, mid-March 2020, and my manager Michael Kaufman found me an empty house that I could work from that was going to be safe, and I could make noise 24/7. And then eventually I found a really good rental, another family friend right there in Broad Ripple. And that's where I spent my time all the way up until about 3 months ago. And it was close to my the home we set up in Indianapolis. So I could ride my bike or walk to work every day, and which came in handy because this movie, I didn't sleep very much for a couple of years.
I bet. I
Yeah,
bet.
because we were making the Tomorrow's records. I was producing a record for an artist named Kimbra, which is actually just now finishing up. That was a lot. Very
Gosh.
productive time.
Yes.
It's like I'm not doing anything else. I'm having beautiful family time with extended family for the first time in our marriage. We were close to family, which is really, really nice.
Especially with the little one.
Little one, yeah.
I'm curious, do you have a criteria for things that you take on? Because you do so many different things. Like when you hear certain criteria, what makes you go no or yes to something?
I mean, surprise and a little bit of confusion.
Hmm.
I mean, they kind of go hand in hand because it's not always, but when I hear something and I'm either confused what I'm hearing, like what is that sound? It's like when you're in a natural environment and you hear an animal that you've never heard before, you're not even sure what it is. It's like so fascinating. It's like, what is that sound? I was in the desert the last few days in Joshua Tree, and slept in the park. The second night, there were coyotes very close that were communicating. In some ways, they sounded so much like a dog, but there was an aspect of them that sounded so weird and strange. And I love it. It's like, imagine that with with music, or with art in general, any kind of art. If I'm sort of surprised and confused, it's such a wonderful feeling. And also as sort of a nerd, as a geek of music and technology, if I can't tell how it was made. Or if I'm working on something and I know that it will be difficult or impossible to know how it was made, then I definitely have a bias toward it. I'm like, oh, this is
You're
great.
hooked.
It's definitely a litmus test for me, whether or not it feels like, it's like if you're watching a magic show, but you can see like the ears and stuff behind you can see the illusion or whatever. It's not as magical and wonderful. Because you're an adult, that it's not magic, but it's wonderful because you're not sure how it's being done, right?
Yeah.
But then if you kind of have a screen that you're looking at, it shows you how it's been done. And I feel like in music, you can hear, there's some times you can really just, you can hear how it's done. And again, that goes with my whole thing of like, well, I love Bach, but I really don't want to play it. Like I love listening to these instruments and these sounds and things that are well established and that people are, have made incredible music with. But I'm just myself, I'm really just not interested in using those same tools.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. Okay, last question. Because this is a podcast dedicated to beautiful thinking, which I feel like we've been defining and describing in multiple ways throughout this whole conversation. It's been really lovely. But I do always ask everybody, how would you describe beautiful thinking? Or how would you define beautiful thinking?
One way to define beautiful thinking is considering the potential of the unknown in your present reality in light of wonderful memory.
I love that.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be a good definition for me.
That is a good definition. Well, Ryan, it's been a pleasure.
if not very drawn out.
No, it's thoughtful. That is perfectly in kindred spirit with what you are doing. But man, I hope to see you on the Oscars. Can't wait to see your next film. You are on a roll. Congratulations with all the work. It's amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you found something that inspires you to think strange, different, new, and beautiful thoughts. This podcast was created and produced by Young & Larimore, an independent agency focused on helping national consumer brands take a stand. To explore more about today's conversation and all of the other thinkers I've spoken to, check out our blog, The Beautiful Thinkers Project, or follow us on Instagram @The Beautiful Thinkers.